שמש דקה ומרפא בכנפיה.
Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, sit down here, Ploni Almoni." And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, "The parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech, Naomi is selling it, who has come from the country of Moab. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here, and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you." It's very interesting here. Boaz does not speak of Naomi's plight, of what happened to the family of Elimelech. And he certainly does not focus on the situation of Ruth. Boaz, in this public forum, starts by talking about the land. And I have to take you back to my word study of the Hebrew word root Gaal, which we translate with to release or to redeem. And if I take all the instances where this root appears in the Bible, and I'd encourage you to do it, you will be astonished how often it appears in the context of the land. I may actually say that the primary duty of the Goel, of the Redeemer, is the redemption of the land. And we have to have in our minds, in the background, this central text from Leviticus 25. Read the whole chapter. We have to understand with such verses the context. We have to understand where it comes from, where it goes to. I'll start in verse 23. It says there, "The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. And you are strangers and sojourners, migrants, with me. And in all the land you possess, you shall allow a redemption of the land. If your brother becomes poor and sells part of his property, then his nearest redeemer shall come and redeem what his brother sold. If a man has no one to redeem, then he himself becomes prosperous and finds sufficient means to redeem it, then he will have to calculate the years since he sold it and pay back the balance to the man to whom he sold it. Then he may return to his property." So the land has to be a priority in his thinking if he comes back and goes back to spiritual, to financial prosperity. The reason behind all this, we are told in the very beginning, so that it's clear, ki li haaretz. Mine is the land. It's not about living space. As human beings, we need an environment. From the perspective of the Bible, from the perspective of God, it is all not about living space, not about human rights. I'd like to have continued reading to you. It's about slaves later on and the nation of Israel. It's not about human rights. It's about the right, the honor, the plan of the Creator. Actually, He is the owner of the land, and human beings, first and foremost the people of Israel in the land of Israel, are mere trustees. And they have a duty to redeem the land whenever they can, to repurchase property that has been lost. So the Israelites hold the land as a trust. They could not simply sell it for whatever reason, except if it's an existential threat to them. And that is actually up to this day a very principle here in this land of Israel, that if there is a problem, a conflict, where you have to decide between the land and the life of people, the life is more important than the land. Therefore, the state of Israel was allowed by the rabbinical authorities to return, for example, the Sinai to Egypt. The reasoning was, if that saves lives. That's a discussion up until today, whether it saves lives. God wants fellowship with us human beings. And for this very reason, there is at the beginning of history the creation of the land. And then he starts with Abraham, a history of redemption for humanity. And after choosing Abraham as a tool, the very first thought, look at Genesis 12, is about the land. Whoever thinks, I have Jesus, and therefore I don't need the land of Israel anymore, the land has no importance anymore, has simply not understood this interdependence of God's working with the land, has no glimpse about how creation, how redemption actually works in Holy Scripture. When I worked through this, I know that the land became very important to me. And I'm aware of it, that land was created for man and not the other way around, man for land. I mentioned it already, that this is up until today here clear. It's actually interesting that the rabbis today made a decision that is in line with the decision of Yeshua 2,000 years ago, when there was a clash of interests between the Sabbath and life. And he decided that Sabbath was not made, man was not made for Sabbath, but Sabbath was made for man. So the land is very important, has an unchanging and decisive significance in God's plan, and it remains an instrument in the hands of our Father in heaven, which He uses for the salvation of His humanity, and He has never put it aside and said, now I'm using something else.